In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, and may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon His last and beloved Messenger Muhammad, and may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon you all. This is the 29th episode in the Quran in Practice program, as entitled Creation versus Evolution from the Guidance of the Quran. In this episode I will show, Allah God willing, how to prove the fact of creation and how to disprove the theory of evolution. Now, to start with the evolution theory, there is a basic premise that this theory stands upon. And this premise is the following: that the creature is capable of changing its design as required by the surrounding environment, and that the design of the creature and changes occurring in it can be passed over to later generations. So this is the basic premise of evolution theory, is that the creature can change its design according to the environment, and these design changes, are transferred from one generation to another. So what I will show in this episode, that this basic premise is false. And if this basic premise and this basic kind of premise that the evolution theory stands upon, if it's false, then the whole theory crumbles and falls. Now, there is a danger of evolution theory, and this danger from a religious point of view is the following: is that if the creature is capable of changing its design as required by the creature, so what's the need for a creator? Again, if the creature is capable of changing its design as he wants, so what's the need for a creator? Now, how to disprove evolution theory? Using one scientific fact. So I will, God willing, disprove evolution theory using one scientific fact. Now, in evolution theory, the way that these design changes are transferred from one generation to another is using a DNA molecule. So people who believe in evolution, the basic kind of way and the main way and the only way for the design changes in one generation to be passed for another is using the DNA molecule. Now, the DNA molecule is a double-strand, double helix, which contains 4 bases, 4 geometrical shapes, hexagonal shapes. And these shapes, they code and they contain the information needed to build the basic building block of the creature. Now, so the DNA molecule contains the engineering information on how to build the proteins and the basic building units of the human body. So, in fact, it contains the word of Allah God Almighty on how to create the basic building blocks of the creatures. Now, it's known for a fact that DNA is found inside the cell, and the cells are the factories of human body. So the DNA, this information, is found inside the cell. So the DNA, it can control the production of proteins within the cell. Now the question arises, now when these proteins, they leave the cell, suppose that 1 billion collagen proteins, they leave the cell. Once these molecules, they leave the cell, they are no longer under the control of the DNA molecule. Again, when the collagen proteins, they leave these basic building blocks, when they leave the cell, they are no longer under the control of the DNA molecule. So what tells these molecules to shape themselves in the shape of a hand, or a foot, or a head? Now let me give the following example to illustrate this point further. Suppose that you have a factory, and inside the factory there is the information to produce the products. Suppose the products here are the kind of bricks. They are bricks. Now when these bricks, they leave the factory, they are no longer under the control of the factory. So what tells these bricks to form in the shape of a house or a certain structure? So we see with scientific facts that the DNA cannot transfer design characteristics of a creature from one generation to another. Again, the DNA does not contain the information on the design aspects of the creature, the shape of the hand, the head, or the foot. So how can it transfer this information if it does not contain it? So this breaks down and destroys evolution theory. Since the basic premise, the basic idea of evolution is that DNA transfers its design changes, so we see that the DNA is incapable of transferring these design changes. So this disproves the theory and destroys it. So now, how to prove the fact of creation? I will show now, to proceed to show how to prove the fact of creation. Now, Allah God Almighty states in the Noble Quran, the last revelation of Allah God to people, the following: and indeed Allah God created human out of an extract of clay. Thereafter Allah God made him as a nutfa in a safe lodging. Then Allah God created the nutfa into an alaqa. Then Allah God created the alaqa into mudgha. Then Allah God created the mudgha into bones. Then Allah God could cover the bones with flesh. Then Allah God brought it forth as another creation. So blessed be Allah God, the best of creators. Now, these are kind of verses 12 to 14 of chapter 23 of the Noble Quran. Now, in these verses, Allah Almighty states the scientific mechanism on how He creates, or how He created the human body, and how He creates every creature on the earth. So here Allah Almighty states the scientific mechanism on how He created the human body and created every creature on the earth. So I will proceed to show the following: that suppose, if you want to think of it as the following, suppose that this is a theory on how creation was made. Now, if I show that the scientific experiments and the scientific facts they are in perfect match with this theory, it becomes a law. So, once again, suppose that this is a theory. If I proceed to show that the outcomes of this theory are in perfect agreement and perfect match with the scientific facts, then this theory becomes a law. And that I will do in a minute, Allah God willing. Now, if we go back to the verses, we see that if we go step by step, in the first part of the verse, Allah states that He created humans out of extract of clay. So we see here that Allah Almighty created humans from soil components and water. Now, the outcome of this is that if we analyze the elements comprising the human body, they should be identical to soil components and water. So if we analyze the elements comprising the soil, we see that it contains hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, calcium, phosphorus, iron, etc. Now, if we analyze the elements comprising the human body, we see that the human body is comprised from exactly the same elements found in the soil. So glory be to Allah Almighty. We see a perfect match between what Allah Almighty states in the Quran and what we find now. So all the creatures on the earth, they are comprised of the same elements found in the soil. Not only the names of these elements, but also the concentrations. For example, in the soil, in a fertile soil, the one that you can grow plants in, calcium is the highest concentration. It goes into rocks and so forth. We see that in the human body, calcium has the highest concentration. It goes in bones and structural materials of the human body. Also, for example, iron in the human body is involved in gas transport. We see that iron in the soil also is involved in gas transport as well. So glory be to Allah Almighty. We see a perfect match between what Allah states in the Quran and what we find in the human body. So this is a scientific proof to the fact of creation. Now, We continue the verse. Allah states, thereafter God made him as a nutfa in a safe lodging. What is a nutfa? A nutfa it's a word in the Quran which refers to the DNA molecule. It can be deduced that it refers to the DNA molecule. So the second stage is that a human is created from a nutfa, a DNA molecule. Now, as I said, DNA is a double helix containing bases which are kind of geometrical shapes, hexagonal shapes. And these hexagonal shapes, they contain the information for the production of the basic building blocks of the human body. Now, if we link this to another verse in the Quran, in chapter 27, verse 88, which states, and you will see the mountains and think them solid, but they pass away as the passing away of the clouds. The manufacture of Allah, God, who perfected all things. Verily, He is well acquainted with what you do. So in this Quranic verse, we see that Allah God Almighty states that His creation is a process of manufacturing. So the process of manufacturing needs a factory, and it needs the information, the engineering information for the production of the products. So the engineering information is found in the DNA molecule. So we see, brothers and sisters, a perfect match between the statements of the Quran and what we find in the human body and all creatures on the earth. Then Allah states in the verse that then Allah, God, created the nutfa into an alaqa. An alaqa, what's an alaqa? An alaqa is an object that clings to another object. And in this stage, we see that the human body is comprised or composed of a collection of cells, which are called stem cells. And this collection of cells, it clings to the inner wall of the womb of the mother. So the next stage in creation, that this nutfa, this DNA, it's transformed into cells, stem cells, and these cells, they are kind of like a lump of cells, and they cling to the inner wall of the womb. So we see again a perfect match between the statement of the Quran and what we discover, what we see in your body. Now, an alaqa is the collection of cells. Now, we know that Allah Almighty describes His creation as a process of manufacturing. The manufacturing process needs a factory, and the cells, they are the factory of the human body. How can I say that the cells are the factory? If we study the cell, we see that the cell, that raw materials enter the cell, and these raw materials are the elements found in the soil, and which are amino acids. They go into the cell, and the products leave the cell, which are the proteins. So this is the function of a factory, that you have raw materials transformed into products. And the cell, you have raw materials transformed into products. And the raw materials, amino acids, and transformed into proteins. So this is another stage. Now the next stage, Allah states, then Allah created the alaqa into mudgha. What's a mudgha? A mudgha, it's a term which refers to an object that's been chewed. Now, we see that the alaqa stage, where you have the cells, they are kind of homogeneous distribution of cells, like a sphere of cells, of stem cells. The next stage, Allah states that this homogeneous spherical shape or spherical pattern of the cells are transformed to object that has been chewed, meaning there is a distribution of these cells. For example, a certain quantity of cell is placed in a certain place, another quantity in another place. So we see here what I call the biomass distribution, that Allah Almighty places a certain amount of cells in the head area, in the arm area, the thigh, the feet, etc. So here, exactly what we see in the embryonic development stages, we see that after the stem cell formation in a kind of spherical shape, we have a shape which can be best described as an object that has been chewed, meaning distribution of biomass. And this distribution of biomass, from an engineering point of view, we can deduce from the Quran that Allah God Almighty, the energy that supplies the growth of creatures on the earth comes from the earth. So the energy that causes you to grow comes from the earth, and that can be deduced from the noble Quran. Now, the interaction of this energy with this biomass distribution produces the energy field that you can see on the screen on the left. So what you see on the left is the energy field, the gravitational energy of the Earth, interacting with the cells, distribution of cells in the mudghah stage. And you see, brothers and sisters, that the energy field is a perfect match between, with the shape of the human body. And this is very important because before birth, Allah the Almighty shapes you in the womb with the form of a human, because Allah knows that you need this form to perform your functions in life. Now, this is in contrast, it's opposite direction to evolution theory. Evolution theory states that because of the environments like this, you are shaped like this. No, we see here by scientific facts that your shape, this human shape, is given to you in the womb prior to birth. So Allah knows that you need this form to function in this life, so He gives you this form in the womb of the mother. And it's not because the environment is like this that the shape is like that, is like this. Now, then Allah states that He creates the mudghah into bones. So we see that after the formation of this energy field, Allah the Almighty causes the bones to grow on this field. And as you can see on the screen, in the lower right corner, you see a perfect match between the growth of bones and the energy field from the earth, which was formed in the mudghah stage, the biomass distribution stage. And as you can see, that bone is inhomogeneous. There are certain trajectories, certain paths in bone, shown in bright white. And this kind of white regions in bone, they are the main load handling pathways in bone, meaning that they handle the loads applied on the human body. Now, keeping in mind that the bones are formed prior to birth, so Allah the Almighty knows what kind of forces that you will encounter in this life and their orientations. So He designed your bones to be compatible with these forces. So this proves the fact that there is a creator and a designer, Allah the Almighty, who designed you prior to birth to be able to function with the environment that you will be born in. Then Allah states that He covered the bones with flesh. And at a later stage, we see that the bones are covered with, for example, muscles. And muscles, Allah Almighty attaches them to the bones in certain places, so that if we take, for example, these kind of bone trajectories I talked about, these pathways, load handling path bone, each pathway has a beginning and an end. And at one end you have muscles, and at the other end you have the external forces. So Allah attached the muscles in certain places to counter external forces that you will see after birth. So before, in the womb of the mother, you are not subjected to environmental forces, but Allah designed you and designed the muscles to be in certain places, so when you are born, you are able to handle these forces. And you see here the proof for the fact of creation and disproving the evolution theory, that the environment designs you. Now, the last kind of part of the verse, Allah states that Allah brings it forth as another creation. What is the meaning of this verse? Now, all of the stages I just mentioned, they occur prior to birth, before birth. And you have no control over them. They occur in the womb. You cannot influence these changes. They are occurring there. Allah states, Allah God Almighty states that after birth, all what happens to you from birth till death, it's described that Allah brings it forth as another creation. All of what happens to you in this life is in this kind of Quranic statement. How do we understand this? This is something I call functional adaptation. What does this mean? Now, after birth, you have a certain amount of muscle mass, bone mass, etc. Before birth, this amount of muscle mass and bone mass, you have no control over it. After birth, this amount of muscles, they are influenced by environmental changes. For example, suppose now you start carrying heavier weights. Suppose that you start a job, and in this job you are carrying heavier loads. The first day you will feel pain in your muscles and bones, and this pain will become less and less in the days to come. What's happening here? What's happening that this external force, it triggers adaptation, which increases the amount of muscles and bones that you have. So the size of your bones and muscles increase. And this is a mercy of Allah Almighty, because Allah Almighty's creation is all based on mercy. Now, when the size of your bones, the cross-sectional area of bone increases, the amount of stress on your bones decreases, and the amount of pain decreases and then vanishes. So this is a mechanism that Allah Almighty integrated in His creation, that it can adapt to the environment by changing the size, the amount, the quantity of tissue that you have. It's not changing the design. So here there is a huge difference between what I'm saying here and the evolution theory. Evolution theory states that the environment can change the design. For example, your hand can become, or your arm can become a wing. No, what I'm saying here is that Allah Almighty placed mechanism that the cross-section area, the amount of bone that you have, the area can become larger or smaller. But your arm will always remain an arm. It will not change to another kind of type of wings or other kind of thing. So here, a functional adaptation, that the size changes. The size can become larger or smaller, but the design remains constant. And the increase in size is to lower the stress on your bones and muscles. So you see, brothers and sisters, the beauty of the fact of creation and the mercy of Allah Almighty onto His creation. And we need to show this to people, such that people will be attracted to the Book of Allah Almighty, the Noble Quran, and will be guided to the path of the Allah Almighty, the Creator. And to know more details about this topic, please visit my website at www.quran-miracle.com, and you can email me at sayyidquran@com, and may the peace and mercy of Allah be upon you all.